Now, as we celebrate Father's Day today, we take a look at the role of fathers in our homes, our communities, sport, education, and even politics. Research has proven that children with involved fathers are more likely to be emotionally, socially, and intellectually healthy, whereas those with absent fathers are more likely to engage in risky behavior. In studio, I'm joined by former youth leader who is currently working as a counselor in the city of Ekurhuleni, that's Nkosindiphile Xhakaza. We have Bheki Malinga, a business relationship manager at Patriarchy, as well as media studies lecturer at WSU, Jeff Moloi. Thank you very much to all three of you for joining us here at eNCA. Let me start with you, Mr. Xhakaza. In terms of the fact that you're a person who basically gives life coaching, that's what a counsellor does in most cases. Tell me about the kind of young people that you speak to in the city of Ekurhuleni, where you have townships such as Tembisa. How are fathers performing in areas such as that?
No, thank you very much, Masiko, and greetings to our viewers at home. We, in leadership, often we look at young people, and of course encourage them to prepare them for the future, to actually take charge of their own development, to participate in various activities, to go to school, obviously, but to also partake in extramural activities, including, any developmental activity, but also to get them, to demobilize them from participating in wrong activities, be it drugs and substance abuse. But importantly, there is a role which I think we must emphasize, the role of parents, the role of fathers, the role of dad in actually producing the society that we want. And importantly is, young people are the future. O.R. Tambo says the nation that doesn't invest in its youth doesn't deserve its future. And I think there is a critical role that homes, our own homes, they actually play. And I think that's an area that we need to emphasize, because the young person that you find on the streets, that you mobilize, you find in school, that you mobilize in sport, there is a critical role of fathers. And I think it's an area that we have to work even harder, so that we are assisted to actually produce the future nation that we want.
All right, let me come to you, Mr. Malinga. When it comes to fathers, every time that discussion is a bit on edge in South African context, right? And we found out that statistics show that South Africa is one of the leading countries with absent fathers when it comes to their children's lives. Quite a huge concern, obviously, but why to this day, it's 2023, and we're still discussing this issue or this topic as if it's something sensitive? Fathers can decide to be there, others decide not to.
Thank you so much, Maseko. I think the one of the biggest problems that causes the absent fathers is the situation where the father and the mother usually do not get married at some stages, and the father and the mother separate for whatever reasons. And then you find that there are families that are headed by single parents and so on. So I think it's important for us as a nation to embrace the institutions of marriage, the institutions where a father and a mother bring the children up together, because to be honest, really, fathers alone also cannot do it without the mothers that are actually supportive of them. So even if in cases where fathers perhaps for whatever reasons they do not make or form family structures that are normally known in the society, it's important to be responsible as a man, to actually be responsible for your children. Some fathers have got a lot of children from different people, which becomes a burden for them. Some of them, they cannot even afford sometimes to support all of them. But most of all, I think the family, like we can understand, the family is the first structure that actually molds your children. And where children grow up in a family that has got security, they are provided for, regardless of how little your family has. But it's important to have a situation in the family where your family, your children grow up in a secured environment where they build confidence and they grow up like that, because the society actually emanates from the family. So if they grow up in a family that is well-disciplined, that is well provided for, even if you don't have enough, but if you have a provision for your children, they are secured, you try by all means that they go to school, and whatever you have, you give all to your children.
Right.
That sometimes, in most cases, actually results into good sort of children growing up in the society and then influencing, multiplying into becoming a good society and a good people in the society.
Let me bring in Mr. Moloi. Mr. Moloi, you, are a media studies lecturer, yes, but you also are a person who was quite involved in sports. You presented sports as well. I think this is also something that can, just like Mr. Xhakaza was saying, in terms of making sure that there's sports, that there's infrastructure for sports. That is something that can also play a role, right, in terms of people actually or fathers actually being able to be in their children's lives.
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon, Masiho, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. It is true indeed. The amount of interaction and the amount of confidence building that comes from fathers actually interacting with their children through sports. By spending that afternoon maybe at training, if there is a cricket match at your child's school, and on the weekend, going to watch your child, whether it's netball. I've watched netball for the first time in my life this year because my little girl started playing netball at her school, and she's 9. So I'd never watched netball, and the amount of value that creates for the child and for the balance that is going to be, because sport is about a balance in your life. We had here last year, this was a big story in Beni, and all those kids that went and partied, and we know what happened, the tragedy. Everybody was asking, what other options do these children have that they see going out and drinking on a Saturday as being something that is normal? And, sport was mentioned many times for the right reasons, that it is quite a good alternative for children to be playing sport and acting out their youth, all their energy in sport, rather than doing all the things that might harm them.
But it's also about recognizing your privilege, right, Mr. Moloi, and you, Mr. Xhakaza. I'll give you an example. For me, my father, I grew up in Soweto, and my dad had to choose between being able to spend more time with me or taking me to the good school, but not necessarily be able to come to, for instance, your Parktown girls to come see me play the sports, because he had to be working so that he can afford to take me to that school. And we still find that cycle, right, today, especially in areas where you work as a counsellor.
No, definitely. In leadership, the amount of time that you spend outside your home. Communities, they really expect you to be everything. You are a social worker. You have to be an expert across. And for you to do that, you have to spend time to understand challenges within your community, to understand what are the institutions of government, NGOs, and other available resources that are there to actually give support. So it forces you to be, a lot of the time outside than to actually spend your time in communities. But the best way is to take your children with, so that they are orientated around issues that are facing society. Hopefully they also get to develop. But we have to actually make the time to actually support our own kids. But I think I get more exposed to challenges that are facing other children, other families outside than my own. And I prefer pretty much to share what are my experiences. And I think I must emphasize the need of present, dads and families. And we know, I mean, in our society today, we've got challenges, marriages and all those things. There's a lot of challenges. And it talks to, the challenges of the future. And it talks to a need for us to strengthen other, community organs, role of churches and other organized formations to actually play that supporting role. Because it is a societal problem, the challenges of absent fathers, but we must continue to advocate for fathers to actually play their role. We need to build, the nation. And for us to build a nation that is sustainable, it's important that we invest in youth development today. And it started earlyhood. It started in the homes. What type of support do the kids actually receive? So that when we find them in leadership, we actually develop them or encourage them to guide them in different paths. That they become skills, that they build the necessary competencies to support our nation, to support our economy. Because ultimately, that's how we must build the nation, by getting the youngsters today to be prepared to actually take care of the future. And I think government, they are doing their part. They've, if you look at the National Youth Policy, to look at how it categorizes the challenges that are confronting society today. But what is important is the government really drive, and us as leaders to say, young people must take care of their own development. They are the best advocates.
And of course, government they're not the only stakeholder. This is a societal issue. And I just want to bring back you, Mr. Moloi, in terms of what exactly it is that men need to be able to be there and be present fathers, whether it is in your own child's life or to be somebody who does something in the community where other children can also look up to you. You know what I mean? What is it that men need? Maybe there's also societal or rather, psychosocial issues where men are put under pressure to be the ones that provide. Indoda must is one of the things that trend lately on social media, where, people expect men to be the ones that give them money. A woman can just say, I need a girlfriend allowance. Maybe just explain to me, what is it, what kind of support men need to be able to be present fathers?
Yes, indeed, Masego. I mean, we do indeed have all of those societal problems. And you know what? In society, we have so many things that are being said. It's up to you to listen to the message that you want to hear. And this is where I think those men that are actually doing it and believe in what they're doing, we need to share this. We need to speak it amongst ourselves. We need to discuss this role, this new role that we've been assigned, that is so important in a child's lives. I mean, here in the Eastern Cape, this province is unique for one reason, that everybody knows this is where colonialism and apartheid probably hit the most. I'm talking about the 19th century here, when they came here looking for labor and split up families. And I grew up, in my time, in the 70s, 80s, I grew up knowing that half the homes, the fathers were working in Johannesburg, and the children did not have relationships with their fathers because their fathers were working on the mines, and you were lucky if you saw your father more than once a year. So we are growing up, a boy, a young man growing up in that environment, even if you do find work close by, What examples do you have of being a father, being present, playing a role, because you didn't see it, with your father, because your father was not there. So you knew that this thing of raising children, it's for mothers, and so the people that actually do understand it. We need to be deliberate about it. We need to speak about it, and speak about it as being something that is very fulfilling, because it is fulfilling to actually be able to. You were talking about privilege. I was privileged indeed, because I remember when I was in Johannesburg raising children, working at eNCA, I could split up I knew that if I had a shift in the evening, I have an afternoon off, and I could go fetch my kids from school, watch them train, watch them play as well. So you have to grab those small opportunities. Yes, it won't always be there, because it does get busy. It does get busy, but you need to be deliberate about it. We need to prioritize. We need to listen to the right messages about this. Discussions like this help, and when we as men, we go have discussions like this with our friends, and not spend all our time together, alone without our children.
Let me bring Mr. Malinga in again. Mr. Malinga, how much of this is affected, or is something that it actually derives from patriarchy? What men have learnt in history from their own fathers, and therefore end up teaching other fathers, for instance. Like, for example, what Mr. Moloi said in terms of, some of the things that you see conversations between men. What type of conversations happen between men? Sometimes it's very rude conversations about women, that you end up also sharing with your son, for instance. And then later on, your son also, you're surprised as a father when you see your son, being taken to court, for instance, for alleged rape. And you're surprised as a father. But, what I'm trying to get from the two of you, at least, that I still have with me now, how much of it has to do with patriarchy and historical lessons that your fathers learned from their fathers that came down to you, and now they're going to your sons without realizing it?
Yeah, no, I think men, as men, we do need support. Men in leadership, because leadership is one thing, but parenting and fatherhood is another. Men in who are in industry, men who are in academics, wherever you are, there's sort of challenges, and there's sort of a conversation that we need to be supported on. How do we assist, to ensure that childhood development is not just seen as an issue. It actually starts in our own families. But also there must be an appreciation of where we come from as a nation. Issues of tradition. What do you do? What is the role as a father in the house? And sometimes we think this conversation is for feminist or women organization to talk about patriarchy and so forth. We don't have this strong conversation amongst them. But we're encouraged when we see youngsters, young, leaders actually engage in. I know in Ekurhuleni, for instance, there is a program driven by some of the young people to actually advocate for a greater role of manhood. What men must do, to support the family, to support the children. But even under the difficult schedule that we have, to be out there to try and fend for our families, because importantly is that you must come back as a man. There are those pressures that you must put, meal on the table. I think that's a number one pressure, bring security and comfort to your own home. And often enough, you neglect the most important role, to actually also understand the children of today. Because while you understand yourself, the type of challenges that these kids go through, of course, there's variety of opportunities, technology. These kids are exposed to things that we've never been exposed to. They sit in their own rooms, they interface with another society.
Yeah.
They find friends who talk to them, they look up to them. There's different kinds, influencers, and all these type of things that as men we need to understand for us to give a proper guidance, to give us a proper support role. But we too need to have support structures. It means wherever we sit, we must try and have this conversation. How do we better?
But also, you're the same people who teach each other that men mustn't cry, that men mustn't be sensitive. So maybe when you support each other, you can cry on each other's shoulders and you wouldn't feel embarrassed to cry in front of your friend. Hopefully that's what happens in some of these circles. But Mr. Malinga has been able to come back. And Mr. Xhakaza, I like the point that you brought up there. And it's so unfortunate that with these topics we have a very short time. But I want to give Mr. Malinga the last word. Mr. Xhakaza brought a very important topic, which is culture. What culture teaches you is the role of a man and a role of a woman. And, that sensitive topic of how culture can also make a man forget that he also should play a sensitive role in their child's life and not just the authoritative, right?
Yes, yeah, you're quite right. I'm sorry for that disconnection.
No problem.
Indeed, I must say I'm lucky to have grown up in a family that whilst I come from a humble place at eNCA in KZN, which where the culture thrives, and but I grew up. My father was a teacher, and my mother was a housewife. So we grew up respecting those patriarchy structures and so on, but we were never discouraged to partake in a lot of things. I mean, we were all encouraged to go to school and so on. So I think we need to evolve with the culture as a society, because there are certain things that we need to try and remain, or rather and adapt to as we get into new areas. What I find, and when you get into townships and what used to happen in the rural areas there are societal issues that are actually making children grow up in a different way from a rural child and an urban child. Sometimes you find that the urban children are not exposed to that kind of discipline that the children in the rural areas are. But the fact that we have this issue of a father or a man being not, the men don't cry and so on, yes, that's still there. But nowadays, I don't teach that to my children. My children make choices for themselves. For instance, I don't anymore like old parents used to say, I want you to be a teacher, I want you to be whatever. My children choose their own careers, and they've been all successful. But the family structure is also very important in what you believe in as a family unit. I'm a Christian, and so I have those values that I follow, and I drive to follow the Christianity, or the discipline of Christianity, and I teach that to my children. So I took that up from my father, from my mother, and I tried to put it across to my children without forcing it to them. And I've seen that working, that, the good things that you do, the children tend to copy. So, the experts in the study of cultures, they could actually explain that much better than I am not a specialist in the social sciences. But basically, what I do, I try to emulate what my parents used to do, and I guess what I do as well is my children actually try to copy what I do, and it's been successful.
Well done on being a present father. Happy Father's Day to you, and I hope they spoilt you. That is Bheki Malinga speaking to us there. A little earlier on, we had Jeff Moloi, and we also have Nkosindiphile Xhakaza. Happy Father's Day to you too as well, and I hope you'll get home to a nice, warm, 7-color meal from your children. Thank you for coming and speaking to us.